Are we live? Are we on? Are we on?
We are live.
Yes, sir. Good evening,
Got
good
this
evening, good
morning going
evening,
to do it.
good evening, good evening, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, everybody. What's good? What's good? What's good, family?
We
What's
live?
good?
Are we on? Are
Welcome
we on?
to the greatest podcast on your social media page. It's that time again for the Black and the Bold podcast. Here where you'll have some thought-provoking, gut-wrenching, and definitely some tear-jerking content that you just can't get enough of, which is why you're here with us tonight. Listen, we're gonna jump right in the conversation, but before we do, we're gonna take it in the right way. Of course, I'm the bold, but we're gonna turn over Brother Black. We're gonna start this thing off right. How's it going, my brother?
Hey, welcome. Hey, this is Dwayne Johnson, DJ, otherwise known, growing up, and on this show, known as The Black. I'm a graduate and native of Valdosta, Georgia. Went on to Georgia Tech, graduated there with an electrical engineering degree there. Went on to do some graduate work in management at University of Maryland, and I've come back home to my hometown of Valdosta, Georgia, after spending some time in DC, doing some great things in the engineering and defense contracting world there. All the while, doing some investments in properties over the last, 15 years. And so with that, my wife and I, we own our own business, plastered on the background screen here, Bridge Builder Education and Investments, and along with other things that I do within the community. One up there in the top up there is the Copeland Museum, African American Museum, which I'm a board member on. And so I'm proud of that, and basically just staying involved with the community, but mainly being an advocate for education and economic development within our own part of the city. That's my spiel, bro. I'll take it and hand it right over to you as the bold counterpart.
Yes, sir. Edward Mack, Valdosta, Georgia, Lowndes High grad, University of Central Florida. Proud Knight. Bachelor's of Healthcare Administration there. Went on to the corporate world. Did some work with in power delivery with one of the major power delivery systems here in the South. Then transitioned over to Department of Developmental Disabilities. Then went back to get that master's of public administration. So now we're moving along. We have our E3 Legacy Services LLC, and we're looking to start another leg, hopefully within the next 60 to 90 days. So things are picking up, man, here in Jacksonville. We're just trying to do some great things. Father of two, one will be 18 next month, so I'm gonna kick him out as soon as his birthday comes. But I'm glad to have him here with me, and of course my daughter here as well. But yeah, man, I'm just excited about what we got going on, starting that legacy, and on top of that, man, I'm having fun doing it. But before we go any further, of course, she just keeps on coming back. We just cannot get rid of her. She's almost like a gnat that just won't leave you alone at the kitchen table while you're eating watermelon. She just won't. No, I'm just kidding. But we're thankful tonight to have our beautiful co-host with us, Black, Bold, and of course the beautiful. How you doing, Miss Suzette?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Resilient. I guess I have to be on this. But I am doing well tonight. So here locally, we're right smack dab in the middle of Wintersville Classic Week. So it's been very exciting around town lately. So I'm doing great. I am Suzette Michelle. I am third counterpart of this Black and Bold trio. So ecstatic to be here, be a part of it all. I'm a native of Valdosta, Georgia, graduate of Lowndes High School, graduate of Valdosta Technical College, where I graduated with radiologic technology degree. I served the community in healthcare. I too, just this year, have launched my own business, Divine Shine. So check me out on social media on all the platforms. Check me out. And I'm just excited about this. I'm excited about this blueprint, man. So a major component in our community, part of the foundation of our community. So we're tapping into, we're having some serious conversations with these series, and I am excited to hear the male perspective and also excited to give a female's perspective of it all as well.
Good. What you got for us tonight, my brother? How you want to
Man, I tell you, we're going to continue this conversation wrapped around the blueprint, just as beautiful Suzette just, insinuated there. Eventually, I'm gonna go live on Facebook as Suzette typically does. I like the idea that she had on there, so I'm gonna press the button in a minute. But first, I want to basically give a little background on this. So sort of a did you know from this perspective. But with regards to mental health, there are 13.4% of the U.S. population that is identifying as Black or African American, and of those, over 15% having mental mental illness in the past year. And so that equates to about 7 million people. And of course, that figure is more than the population of Chicago, Houston, and Philadelphia. Continue on here that overall, though, mental health conditions occur in Black and African American people in America at about the same or less frequency than the white America. However, the historical Black and African American experience in America has and continues to be characterized by trauma and violence more often than their white counterparts, and impacts emotional and mental health of both youth and adults. So finally, historical dehumanization, oppression, and violence against Black and African American people has evolved into present day racism. Of course, we know what that means, and cultivates a uniquely mistrustful and less affluent community experience characterized by a myriad of disparities, including inadequate access to and delivery of care in the health system. And of course, now that we're in COVID season, that has another effect. So police brutality, news media that doesn't, give us a right angle on things, divisive political rhetorics, adding to that compounding effect. If you hadn't heard enough adjectives and nouns that I've already put in there that Black people have against them out of the gate. So this is something that we're going to talk about today, that we're going to dive into as much as we can. Us three on this panel, as always, are here for you. We're advocating for Black America, and we don't shun away from our friends on the other side to join the conversation. As a matter of fact, let me go and give a shout out before I forget that this topic came in from one of our high school graduates there at Lowndes High. They graduated along with Bold and myself, Miss Melanie, and I won't disclose last names for that sake. But anyway, Melanie gave this topic as an example. We asked on Facebook. I asked on my Facebook personally, what are some topics that you like to hear from with regard to the Black and the Bold conversation? And this came up as far as mental health issues that are compounding in our communities and don't get discussed. Another young lady by the name of Dr. Hill, she also presented this as a topic of choice for us to discuss on the Black and the Bold, and hopefully we bring her into the conversation next week. So just as full disclosure, as always, we are not the subject matter experts. We are just like you, but we want to bring the conversation to the table, because if we don't, then you don't, and we don't progress as a culture. So with that said, Brother Bold, I'm going to pass the proverbial mic over to you to continue that conversation. But there's the background, the legwork, the foundation about what we're going to talk through tonight.
Absolutely, my brother and my sister. Tonight we're going to talk about trauma. We really want to dig down to what trauma is, because I think we have to go ahead and just admit to the fact that we have experienced and are dealing with trauma that is our own, and also trauma that is not our own. And so tonight we're going to find space and opportunity to really dig into definitions, kind of go into more defining or being more specific about what trauma is, or what we identify trauma as. And then we're going to share some experiences about some of the things that we may have delved into in our life experience, maybe the things we didn't want to experience and had to, we grew from, we learned from. But trauma is a real thing in relationships. Trauma is, by definition, trauma is basically an emotional response to terrible events like accidents or rape. I don't even like using that word, especially on YouTube. It's we'll just say great or natural disasters. That's the basic bottom line, definition of what trauma is. I think if we all look over our relationships, we'll be able to really highlight the fact that all of us have experienced some sort of event that caused a major emotional response that spawned out of relationships, not from an accident, not from you fell and you bumped your knee or whatever, but actually from having an interaction with the opposite sex. We've all had things that have caused us to be highly emotionally responsive, and that can really affect our ability, to really cooperate. It can affect our ability to assimilate into relationships. It can affect our ability to communicate. There's a lot. It causes us to put up boundaries and barriers that makes our coexisting even more difficult due to the trauma. Because we got to realize, like we talked about, we're going to get into tonight. Trauma, it doesn't leave you. Trauma leaves a scar. Every traumatic event I've learned leaves some form of scar, whether it be physical, emotional, spiritual, or whatever. Sometimes financial. They can leave scars. And so tonight we're going to talk about how can we deal.
By the way, hey, Malik, Malik, how you doing? Claire, and of course Suzette Michelle joining on both airways here. I see you.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, guys. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. But just the idea of us being able to dig in tonight to really understand and see where we are. So that's something that we really want to highlight tonight. But again, for the sake of understanding and definition for all that are involved tonight, trauma is an emotional response that usually is a cause of a terrible event, like an accident, like being taken advantage of, or natural disasters. So those are certain things that we could just kind of use as examples, of what trauma is. But we'll get a little bit deeper down into the idea of what trauma is to us and how we identify it and how we move through it. But I definitely want to jump right into the conversation. I know we've got some. Do we have any more individuals online with us tonight before we jump right in?
Yeah, actually, Calvin Berrien has joined in. Of course, I've got a whole number of people that are on YouTube right now. And again, I invite those that are on Facebook Live also. If you can, jump on YouTube at the Black, the Bold channel, subscribe to it so that you can join really on the main platform that we're streaming from. And so if I may then, Bold, just kind of segueing into really kind of diving into some example areas that we're going to talk about tonight with regards to contributors to trauma, our trauma as Black America, and also how that merges into our relationships. So that's really the main segue that we came out of last week with regard to our relationships, getting that restoration occurring to the strong, healthy relationships that we aspire to have. But in this case, what are the effects that transpire that keep us from getting a healthy relationship, also allow us to build in the case of some of those contributors, again, we'll double back. We talked about this yesterday when we were really looking for the show. There are certain things that really are our community, but they are actual contributors, and they manifest in some instances that we'll discuss, such as our education system, such as the judicial system, financial setbacks that we may have. Religion, we can talk about that. Some people don't want to talk about that, but that's what the Black and the Bold does. So if I may, I'll give you some comments also. I listened to a video earlier on YouTube, and one of the psychologists, sorry about that were discussing this matter. She described a triangle. And so if you can imagine, when there is trauma occurring, there typically, really, it has a victim, right? So there's a victim, there's a rescuer, and then what we don't consider times is there's usually a rescuer present. When you have that traumatic event happening, that triangle, each of those counterparts, where there can be more than one, each of those counterparts. Okay, hopefully I'm not breaking up too bad on YouTube, but each of those counterparts have a play in the situation that's going on. And so, for instance, in Black America, historically, from a slavery perspective, there was this thing called buck breaking. And for you all that understand that, you'll know where I'm coming from. But buck breaking was a process to where any slave that decided to buck the system, if you will, lead a revolt or whatnot, was captured and then forced out by those white oppressors into the foreground of everyone that was there, all the slaves that were present, so they could basically dehumanize that offender, that victim. The persecutor, the one committing the act, was the white slave owner, or the one who was committing the whipping, the lashing, sometimes raping the male, and so it would take away the masculinity of that individual. Those are some harsh realities that we as Black America had to deal with coming through the slavery arena. The other part of that is the rescuer. And here where I'm going with this. When there's a buck breaking scenario going on, you can imagine that all the slaves would watch what was the person that had perhaps led a revolt on the process.
You're gonna have to repeat that. You're
they
breaking
saw.
up. Say that again. You're breaking up pretty good. You're gonna have to repeat that.
All right. I'm breaking up. How's it going now?
It's still choppy.
Is it much better?
It may be due to the dual streaming.
All right. Yeah. Let me, if you all want to segue, go right ahead, and I'll come back to it if this release now. Is it still choppy?
No. I think
all right.
Yeah.
It's not choppy.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So this buck breaking process, I try to make is that you had these witnesses that were there, the other slaves. So if you fast forward to last year, 2020, when we had the George Floyd incident, that was a real life situation of buck breaking. You had some overseer, the police in that instance, that served as the persecutor against the victim being George Floyd. And you saw those with cameras that were watching. A lot of times the eyewitness does not take charge and rescue the victim, but they internalize what they saw, and that in turn has a traumatic experience against them, not only the victim. So a lot of times we actually pass on trauma or receive trauma through events by watching them, by hearing stories. And so the other piece of this is the science behind it. So what they've done before is an experiment to where rats were used as experiment animals to showcase the effects of trauma. What they would do, they took rats and shocked them, electrocuted them, shocked them as an experiment to see basically if that followed them through generations. And what they saw, as you can imagine, but when the mate did not have the traumatic experience. But when they mated, they saw that the offspring, they didn't necessarily have a response to seeing the shocker, but while the traumatic event was being executed against the male rat in that case, they had a rose inside let's say the cage, for instance. They also had an aroma present, a scent that was present. So what was passed down was that the visualization of that, or that aroma that was around, was what was a trigger for a traumatic event offspring. So the visualization is what was passed down as trauma. The smell was what was passed down as trauma. So it really proved that through 4 generations of these animals actually was a trigger for those animals as far as the trauma being present 4 generations down. And that's essentially what we're experiencing right now. It's not only is it an isolated event 4 generations ago, but it's a generational pathway of trauma, and the trauma keeps happening. When is it ever going to stop? We're connected by trauma before we can actually release it, perhaps multi-generations from now. That's where we are.
Well, I think we're going to have to understand that trauma is, uh, it is also characterized as a deep emotional wound. Brandon Jones wrote an article. It's entitled "Legacy of Trauma." The context of African American existence, and he talks about, that piece you were talking about, the epigenetics part, where basically when it's epigenetic, basically what happens if it happens in the parent, it can be transferred to the children through the DNA. What we have to understand is that our physical body is an amazingly intelligent organism. There's a lot that goes on in our body that we have no clue of. And just like, the percentage of light that we actually see, what do we see, like a tenth of a percent or something like that, about all the light that's around us? There's a lot that we pick up subconsciously, and we don't really realize the impact that it's making on our physical being. We have to realize that we are our ancestors. There's a lot that our subconscious mind can remember from thousands of years ago that we cannot. And so we got to understand that this thing goes much deeper than what we just basically feel with the chill bumps or the anger or the crying or, the depression or whatever. Trauma goes from generation to generation if we're not careful. Trauma affects our brain's ability to connect, to grow, to become smarter. It affects our disease and disabilities. It affects our adoption to health risk behaviors, social, emotional, environmental. It affects a lot of stuff. And we're going to have to get to the realization that we need to go see a surgeon when it comes to dealing with our trauma. We're going to have to start treating our trauma like it's an actual, what is it? Benign? I think, is it benign cancers that stay in one place? Is that correct? Or is it malignant? I can't remember. My brain is
right.
Well, that
but now
benign and malignant is a whole nother definition of that. But
well, just to localize it is what I'm saying. Like, there are some cancers that spread and some cancers that say whatever the word is when they stay in one place or when it's localized in one place.
Yeah,
we're going to have to start treating it like that. Because it is a real illness. It is a real something to deal with. And in actuality, it is as impactful to our psychological being as individuals that go to war, that experience, being missing in action and things like that. Like, trauma is a serious thing. So you're right, brother. We're going to have to really find ways that we can pinpoint it. Like, we go to the doctor and get MRIs and CAT scans and all that stuff. We're going to have to kind of put our life and our past over or under the machine so we can pinpoint our areas of trauma so we can begin to, trying to see how we can extract that or deal with it moving forward. What are your thoughts, Beautiful?
Me?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm trying to drop this link. If anybody wants to look up on YouTube, I'm going to do that right now. I'm sorry, guys. I keep not muting myself on y'all side.
That's okay. Well, yeah, we definitely, first of all, we have to address it immediately. I think that the reason why trauma that starts as a mental issue and bleeds over to our relationships and eventually affects our trauma in our relationships is because we don't address it soon enough. We let it go on and fester. And with your analogy, when cancer spread, is metastasized. So it goes to other areas of our lives. It metastasizes to other areas of our lives. And when we need to kind of know that we need to address it immediately so that we can start the healing process immediately. Even in our bodies, if we have something wrong, the sooner that you address it, the better your chances are of overcoming it or healing from it or recovering from it. So in terms of trauma in a mental sense, I think we let it go on just a little bit too long, and that's because it carries a negative connotation, a negative label in our community. So we have to get beyond that. It's nothing wrong with seeking the help that we need to get in order to, you know, ultimately it's going to help you, but it's going to help everybody that's in your circle of influence. You want to be the best version. You want to display that to be the best role model that you can be, but we have to start addressing it quickly, you know, quickly, immediately. And the most wonderful thing that we have, the most wonderful arsenals that we have now, we have so many resources now where we didn't have, you know, a couple of decades back. It was kind of difficult to seek those things out. And it was more of a chore to kind of address issues that arise mentally and trauma and address trauma that arise mentally. But now we have so many resources, so many outlets, so many agencies that you can reach out to and get some help. So that would be my advice. Let's address it as soon as it comes up.
Well, my question. Well,
let's do this. Let's
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to start the topic. So, but if you say something, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to basically ask the question because I know that there's a lot that we need to address. But in our community, coming from the neighborhoods that we came from, the pathology that we've experienced from our people up until this point, the upbringing, I think that's probably going to be a major step for people in our community to actually own the fact that we have experienced trauma. Because if you think about a lot of stuff that we deal with,
we cover it up.
Some of our other, not even that, but you're right. But some of our other counterparts look at our life as traumatic. You think about it, the neighborhoods we grow up in, some of the conditions that we've grown up in, some of the parenting styles we've come up under. There are a lot of times when others look at, just the Black experience when it comes to being raised and coming up in our neighborhoods and our culture, a lot of that's traumatic. A lot of kids haven't heard their parents, absolutely cuss them out. And you walk away, still knowing your mama loves you, but she tripping, or your dad or whoever. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I think it's going to be a challenge for us in our communities. I'm not highlighting a crutch, but I guess how could we encourage some of our brothers and sisters, to kind of look back over their life and understand and see that, that probably wasn't healthy. The conversation we had before, right? Some of the stuff that we experienced probably wasn't all that healthy. You know what I'm saying? But I think it takes us taking a step back for a moment and looking at it objectively to really get a better understanding. So, I mean, what are some of y'all suggestions that we could do, to encourage them to?
Well, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's take it as I say, topic by topic. Trying to wait for this. Let me know if this is clearing up. Am I clear now?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's dive into it topic by topic to be very specific and hit these balls away here. All right. Because what you're saying is accurate. All right. We don't deal with it. We are probably the most traumatized ethnic group on the planet. And some of that is our lack of being identified or being with identical culture, but why? And so the topic we can get into is religion.
Let's do it.
Let's get it.
Let's do it.
Talk to us about a religion, because here's the thing is that, where's the stat here? All right, Black Americans are more likely to be Christian than Americans overall. All right, this is Pew Research. Other highlights, they talk about Black millennials are more religious than other millennials. And let's see, what's another one? Blacks are more likely than others in the U.S. to read the Bible regularly. All right, so if we're so devoted, why are we the most traumatized in America?
We're not serious.
And what factor does religion play into that?
Well, part of the coping mechanism to deal with the traumatic events that the Black culture has had to endure over the centuries and over the decades, a part of that coping mechanism was religion. People use religion to get through those tough, difficult, traumatic moments, and to hold on to some hope that better days and better situations and better life experiences were ahead of us. So yeah, no, that it kind of, that's why I think the stats lean towards religion being so high in our community, because we use it heavily as an antidote.
Yeah, I would agree. I also think that religion has caused trauma because of our ignorance. Um, there's a huge level amount of ignorance when it comes to biblical history, biblical foundations, the construction of the Bible. There's a lot of information about the Bible we have no clue of its true origins and its true intentions. A lot of times, because we are people of faith, again, because we are a spiritual people, um, that's we lean to the spiritual side without the practical side. And I think because we've leaned so much on the spiritual side and then had a high level of ignorance, it's caused us to believe blindly, then that spills over into, well, God gonna send me a husband. That ain't in scripture, but okay. Stuff like that. God gonna do this, and Jesus is my man, and all of this stuff that's not tied to any real spiritual foundational wisdom or knowledge causes us to kind of blissfully go along believing in God and not really knowing much about him, or having a foundational understanding. Karl Marx said religion is the opiate of the people. If we have something that's greater than us, more powerful than us, has more access, has a greater reach than we do, we'll just back up and say, well, we'll let him do it. And that kind of suffices until something goes wrong or until it happens. So we'll just operate in faith. Well, that's not really, that's kind of like the average everyday person's faith. But because we don't dig into it and understand it for what it is and realize the fact that a lot of that, probably 80 to 90% of that is African anyway. And going beyond just the Bible itself, but reading historical context and getting understanding instead of walking around with this dogmatic belief, that's been problematic. There are a lot of people that have left their marriages because they just don't believe that this is what God wants me to do. Like, it's just stuff like that has caused so many problems. But then again, there's not just our lack of understanding, but then our experiences in churches too. When it comes to how they kind of try to curtail the entire existence, the entire experience. They try to control it, and so they want to try to tell you who to marry and tell you who to be around, and it's a lot that's invasive when it comes to religion, and then on top of that, religion is nothing more than saying about the orphans and the widows anyway. So even our understanding of it all is traumatic because we have these underlying factors or these things that spill over to other parts of our life that cause us to have these deep emotional wounds.
And then look at it from this angle also. One, because we touch on African here. All right. So when we were brought over as Africans to America, what was our religion? All right. It wasn't necessarily Christianity. All right. Christianity was beat into a lot of us. All right. So that, again, we talk about the experimentation that we talked about with the rats. All right.
Right.
What is not really a question, but rhetorically speaking, what then is the correlation to religion, the fear, really putting the fear of God in you, but the fear of God being whipped into you to be an assimilated Christian, to the point to where all the folk stories, all the oral traditions, all the orishas that were being worshipped and brought over, if you practiced any of that, it was whipped out of you, to the point to where now the effect is when we look at witch doctors, when we look at tarot reading, the cards, when we look at the zodiac, the prism, if you will, all the signs and everything, and following the stars, all of that is taboo, but all of that is African based. So now that we've turned the page, all right, what we have not done effectively is understood religion in comparison to spirituality. We've taken religion to be very dogmatic, and you shouldn't do this, and to the point to where, just like you described, Bo, there's some unwritten rules that where did that come from? Tell me what scripture that is. And so that's religion. And religion has like this power versus being able to use the spiritual nature of Christianity to actually lead your life in that realm. And I say realm intentionally, in that realm, like you just said, there's a certain wavelength that we can only see. There's a certain wavelength that only we can hear. But there's another realm that spirituality can commune with. But we've taken spirituality, i.e. religion, to be the answer for all the physical areas of our life also that have a correlation, but it does not mirror the one-to-one cause and effect. Because what we haven't done effectively, now bringing us back to this conversation, is how to deal with each other, man and woman, from a relationship standpoint. And I think that's where we're failing, particularly we're talking about the church in this case, and we'll flip it to somewhere else. But in a church standpoint, we are doing a poor job of teaching our men and women to deal with and be effective in a relationship.
Yeah, and I do, and of course we're gonna. So I'll give Suzette some floor, and then I'll come back. And you hadn't had a chance. Go ahead.
Well, thank you kindly. But most definitely the church has fallen in that area. It used to be practice where men and women were groomed in those arenas, but now, over the past couple of decades, the focus of religion versus spirituality has kind of taken a negative connotation. And so some of the things that were established to help us try to connect spiritually to a higher being, and I believe in the trilogy, God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But whatever your higher being is, religion has taken away the connection of spirituality and how to deal with that in your human form and human relationships. So definitely we've fallen in the area with trying to cultivate spirituality and how that fits in with, relationships. So I would agree that we've fallen off on that. But just religion, period, has contributed some to the trauma that we experience, because like we said, it enables us to not necessarily deal with the reality, deal with the issues that are at hand, and it kind of just sugarcoats it or glazes it over with, okay, everything will eventually work out, everything will eventually be okay if you follow this particular tradition. But it leaves us, vulnerable to continue with the trauma. Nothing gets addressed completely. And so again, we're going to have to figure out how can we address it and to the reality, make things real, make it real, make it applicable to our lives and in our relationships. One of the young ladies have commented on one of our viewers tonight. So I definitely wanted to go back to that before we go too far down, but she said it was hard to seek help when what happens in the house stays in the house and it's ingrained in you. She also went on to say that, this whole thing about being a snitch, saying people don't want to be a snitch. Snitches get stitches. Fear of breach and confidentiality, all of those are problems that continue to perpetuate the trauma because it's not getting addressed. It is kind of hard when we have a culture where you are frowned upon for snitching on someone, or you're frowned upon, or you're ostracized really for snitching, and then also the fact that you're going out seeking help. But that's where we come into play. To go back to a comment that you made earlier, or it was really a question, Edward, or Brother Bo. What can we do to help? We need to start normalizing and not letting society pick or demonize the fact that somebody is getting mental health. So sometimes it's people in our own circle that detours you from getting help. Oh, what what do you need that for? What's the problem? Are you all this negative, dark cloud stuff, when people are building up the courage to try to get the help they need. So we're going to have to start encouraging people and letting them know that it's okay. If you need help, you need to get help, mentally, because you are the first one usually to know that there is a problem. So when someone is brave enough and has finally built up enough courage to seek help, let's be supportive of them. Let's not, tear them down and make them feel, like that's the wrong choice for them to make. So we got to start normalizing get help.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I wanted to add to that was you were talking about how do we get from A to B when it kind of transitioning or turning the page in religion. I think we need to get back to some of the older practices. The older practices of or renditions of religion actually emphasize the male-female concept. They actually brought the duality, the balance through the literature, and they always talked about that positive needing that negative, or that masculine being kind of walking in tandem with the feminine, and making sure that they both exist. A lot of the religion that we hear now is male centered. Even the trilogy is without female, and some would say okay, well, maybe that's the spirit. Well, that's conjecture. We don't really know for sure. I mean, that's
right.
But just being able to make sure that we implement or reintroduce the female or the feminine back into her place and her purpose in that religion or in that spiritual practice. That's one way, because then you can actually create a cohesiveness between the two, understanding that they both have an important part. And that's another reason why there has been a huge exodus of Black men in the church for the past 30 years.
About to go there, you're right.
Yeah, because the gospel is not preached in a balanced form. Now It's all about, you can sin and it's okay, and you live your best life and it's all going to be great. It's all going to be well. God knows your heart. Well, that's not how men work. Men need to see that balance. Men,
structure,
and women too, but we want to see the positive and the negative. We need to know how this thing works. We need to make sure that there's good and bad. We understand life, and our religion has to reflect our life and culture. That's how it is everywhere else. And so, but it doesn't reflect that here in the West for several reasons. And I just think we need to get back to a lot of the things that were practiced prior to the 70s, prior to that, because that's when everything just went crazy, the late 60s into the 70s and 80s. And so if we can go back prior to that and make sure that if whatever faith we're a part of, we're both going. Matter of fact, the husband should be, the quote unquote priest of his home. You know what I'm saying? So he should, whatever religion they've chosen, he needs to be, head and shoulders into that thing, so that he can teach his woman. He can, they can bounce off ideas, what they've been, kind of things they've learned. And then at that point, they can grow together, and then their children can see that. Then now you're killing two birds with one stone, because now you're seeing that, okay, couples can exist, with the same spiritual practice. Not only that, they don't have to be arguing and going back and forth about who's this and who's that. They know their place. And then they're doing it with a loving spirit in front of the children. So, that's several layered response, but I just think that we need to get back to that. And I still scratch the surface with that, but that's something that we still need to think about. If we're going to be a part of a spiritual practice or a faith, get into something that the both of you can, thrive in and grow from and grow in. Just my opinion.
Well, I think also the other thing to add to that, and by the way, I totally agree, and the fact that church seems to have been evolved to today's culture, societal cultural norms.
Yeah.
And so now the church is afraid to call out what spiritually balanced is wrong. All right. It should be a male-female relationship. Not calling that out now. Not calling out, as you just presented, and we presented last week with the relationship discussion, how well groomed that a woman should be for marriage, how well groomed and positioned a male should be to lead a household, so that the woman is not challenging the man for leadership, but has all faith that that man can lead, that I pair myself up with somebody, that we're yoked together, and I know this man will lead me unquestionable, to where I'm not questioning his leadership with a doubt, not challenging his leadership with any doubt. But that has to be the structure that's taught first and foremost. If we're going to be the most religious culture on the planet, or the most Christian base in this country, at least from stat base, then we've got to do a better job of promoting the culture that fits us best. And I think we've gotten a little too wayward with the structure within what is the leading presence in some of our communities, which is the church.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
I really kind of want to throw it on our viewers tonight and get them involved. So viewers, we're talking about, of course, part of the blueprint, relationships, and we're talking about trauma. This particular session, we're talking about experiences in terms of where religion falls in relation to trauma in relationships. Does any of our viewers have any experiences or any comments on that particular subject before we move on to the next contributing trauma factor in relationships?
Good point here. As they're chiming in, please do chime in. What I wanted to add a little bit, as I thought there also, and when you asked the viewers there to please chime in. But the other piece is that, so how does this entity, the church, allow for common participants, the people, the congregation, to hold those in leadership accountable? Where's the pathway for that? And I think that's a part of the solution, because we don't normally promote what that path of accountability is. And everywhere else we do that. So if you don't like your mayor, you vote him out. You go to city council, you go to the public participation portion of the meeting, and you state your case. If you don't like what they're doing in the school system, you go to the Board of Education and you call out the Board of Education, you vote them out. What is the solution for the common participant in a church to actually hold their feet to the fire in the sense of what we're talking about? So if we know there are wrongs in the church, that I want my church to be better upstanding. I want my church to teach us about A and B when it comes to man and woman, and I don't like where we're going. How do the people of that church fight for what structure should be in place?
Oh, trust me, in the black churches, they do have a hierarchy, and the deacon board and the parishioners, they can get somebody out.
Okay, but from a people standpoint, how does that happen?
Same way.
So who do they approach?
There is a hierarchy within the church society. So first of all, you have to be a member of whatever organization that you have a problem of, to you know what I'm saying, one member, one voice, or one vote, basically. So you have to be a member of it. They do it. The problem in the churches is the same problem that we're having in the judicial system. It's no consistency there. So it is something there to get people out and kind of condemn them when they are headed in the wrong path. But the problem is that if you're in this clique and we're okay with you as a person, we like you, we're gonna kind of turn our head to some of the stuff. It's just no consistency there.
So here's what I'm calling out, though, is that these are the problems that cycle through our generations. That's what we're talking about. And I'll just say it, the church, generally speaking, does not support traumatic progression in Black America, yet it's the most foundational entity in Black communities. But then when you put this, you got to be a member, you got to talk to the right person, we've got so many hurdles and red tape that we don't like in other areas, like citizenship and like in the political arena. But we do the same thing to ourselves to put up barriers so that our own individuals can't promote what we're trying to advocate for.
Absolutely.
I'm going to tell you as someone who's actually spearheading a faith-based organization. Church is so watered down to this point. You basically can make church what you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody could be a pastor, anybody could be in leadership, anybody could go set up an organization. How do these outsiders kind of come into the picture to kind of not really make demands, but kind of express what it is that their expectations? I think those individuals that aren't a part of a church should raise their standard when it comes to the church that they connect with. When it comes to the services that they have or that they provide, have those conversations with those parishioners. Most pastors, I ain't gonna say all of them, but there are some pastors that are available, that will talk, that will open up their desk and their office, have these conversations. And secondly, I think that the church is going to have to stop acting like we're Superman, superheroes, and act like this is a boys' club or some type of secret society. We're treating this thing way out of context. And we have to understand that even the scripture says itself that, Jesus himself was amongst the people, when they went to go look for him, for Judas to actually, commit, that major act of betrayal. It says that they couldn't even, he said if Judas didn't pick him out, they wouldn't have known that was him. Mm-hmm. So it looks like, according to scriptures, Jesus was so normal. He looked just like everybody else, which speaks, which inductively speaks to the fact that he wasn't trying to be up here. I think that's another major problem with church. Church folk think we way up here, and everybody that's not a part of our church and organization is down here. We need to start understanding we're all people. We all need each other's support. We need each other's, help. So when it comes to, like you were saying, how do they get involved? How do they kind of infiltrate the system? They should go with whatever church they found value in, whatever religion or faith they found value in. Have those conversations with those people that can help implement that change. Talk to some of the people that go to that church. Find out who's over that particular organization, ministry, or whatever. Find out who is it that you can talk to, and then have those conversations. If they're not open, then that's not the church for you. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's certain things we're just gonna have to raise our expectations of, have these conversations with those particular organizations, because nowadays you can be as part of the same organization but not preach the same thing. So I mean, there's a lot of variables that come with this, but they're gonna have to find a way to get to the people to share their concerns so that those things can be met if that's what they're looking for.
And I definitely get it, and that perspective is definitely necessary because our people are looking for answers, and some of us are blindly following. Kiana Jackson talks about, and I'll kind of try to filter some of this in the way that she says it, but religion was forced down our throats to not go against our abusers. Somehow that translated to fear of our parents in that same discipline, right? We'll talk about parenting in a bit here. It can be basically a brain F. It can brain F you sometimes into submission and suppression, right? With just, again, dogma, right? Latessa Rivers says, you can go through all the chains of leadership, but there's no accountability in our community. It is so much swept under the rug if it doesn't go with the pastor's view, quote unquote, the pastor's view, because he or she is the pastor. Right. Basically, that again, hierarchy that's in place that just should not and cannot be challenged based on tradition.
But again, and man, we got listen. when it comes to this arena, we also have to understand that when we misinterpret the information or the scripture, it'll also misinterpret how we govern the people that follow that scripture. For example, when you start talking about having in Latessa is absolutely right. There is this major push for authority and power and leadership and being in the limelight. But when you have people misinterpreting the fact that we talk about, spiritual things basically don't make sense to carnal things. The light doesn't have comprehension of dark. When you have people that take this type of mentality and then try to say, well, sinners can't come up in here and tell us what to do. That's not the right mentality, because now you're misinterpreting that scripture, but because you misinterpreted it, now you're going to govern people the wrong way also. That's another major problem that we're having, not understanding that, scripture tells us that, they won't know you, by all the antics. They're going to know you by the love you show, not by all that other stuff. And we've gotten away from the foundational principles, and we've made everything else more important than what should be important. We've majored in the minor things and minored in the major things. So that's another reason. But Latessa County hit it right on the head. There is this major push, bull run for power and authority, because you can see it, people popping up churches all over the place.
Right.
And then their lifestyle is all crazy. So yeah,
definitely.
she's
And
right.
I think that lends to the major problem and contributor that trauma has, or religious trauma has, on relationships, because there's no consistency. Depending on what street you're on, what day you go, or what community that you live in, you're going to get several different. There's no consistency or conformity. So then, the problems go unanswered, they go unaddressed. So we're going to come until we find some type of accountability, as the young ladies have said, and some type of consistency. It's going to continue to be trauma in terms of religion, how that relates to our relationships.
So what? So I know we got it. I know we got to transition. But I do want to provide some actionable steps for anybody, because we are providing the blueprint. So again, Black brought up a good point. And I'm just going to piggyback on that. Make sure that if you're looking to rebuild your relationship, you're looking to, have this blueprint available. If maybe you're not in a relationship now, and it's something you want to do in the future. Sit down with your partner and you all discuss your beliefs. That's another thing that even people of the same faith don't think about. Just because you're in the same faith doesn't believe you believe in the same things. So have these conversations with your partner. See where they stand on certain important issues. See if y'all agree, if you don't agree. Because, if you have a man who's an abuser, you have a woman who's headstrong, that's going to create some toxic, traumatic experiences, because the both of y'all don't understand each other nor the God you serve. So have these conversations. How do we deal with this? How do we deal with that? How are we going to raise our children? How all these things need to be a part of the conversation, and then search out a place of faith that you find value in. They give you actionable steps. They give you pragmatic and practical information that you can take home and utilize. You can translate that to your children, so that you don't have this problem, so that your faith is not causing additional trauma in your relationship. Your faith is supposed to glue you together, but in many cases, our faith in our community has torn us apart. So I think that's one actionable step. Have that conversation. The second actionable step I think that most people do or should do when it comes to trying to eliminate trauma: activate counseling within that organization. Become vulnerable with those who can handle it, so they can guide you in that faith. That's another another good tool you can use, so that when you do have tough times, you all can have something that the both of you can go to as a resource. Not just one preaching the Bible and the other one saying, well, I don't believe that. No, you all have had the conversation, whatever your faith is, so you all have somewhat of a reference point to keep both of you all spiritually in line, moving in the same direction. So those are two things that I know for a fact can eliminate a lot of the trauma, if not all of it. When you have those conversations, find the right place that both of you all are happy to go to, happy to serve, and then serve that organization or ministry or whatever with the idea that the both of us are submitting to that, and we're submitting to its precepts and concepts. So that's just me, but I hope that helps.
Well, I think so, brother. I think so. Again, actionable steps are definitely necessary. And I think if everyone listened to what you just said, regardless of their religious practices or whatever, a house of worship or non-worship or astrological signs, they should be able to utilize what you just said, because I say all that only because where Keanu Jackson commented, watching so much hypocrisy and
got you breaking up again.
taken.
He got us breaking up, but I think he was commenting on one of our viewers. Miss Kiana Jackson was saying that from watching, her comment was, from watching so much hypocrisy in Christianity being taken as a joke growing up, that Islam has become attractive to her due to its discipline and its bluntness. And I've heard that. I've heard that before. Yeah.
Yeah. And Islam is a lot more. A lot of people don't realize that what was that?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, gotcha. I was just saying that a lot of people don't realize that the Quran and the Bible actually tell a lot of the same stories. One is an extension of the other, coming from same historical context and times. And so, but again, the Islamic religion does allow the man and woman to find their divine place. That's what I was talking about, when we first started talking about this. So the both of them are serving that same deity from two different directions, but it's the same focus. You're both moving in the same direction. So that's one thing that Christianity does not do. Christianity does a lot of separating a lot, in my opinion, when it comes to, especially in relationships, especially when it comes to having healthy relationships. It doesn't talk a great deal about it like I think it should. And so that's why we have to study and do all that extra stuff. So yeah, I agree with Kiana. A lot of times we've taken Christianity for a joke because we rarely see it in its purest, most authentic form. A lot of times we see it out of formality. So
let's do this. Let's switch it up real quick. Let's spin the wheel and go to another factor of trauma within relationships. And I'm going to land on financial trauma. All right. And give a little backdrop to that. Hopefully I don't get choppy up here again, but I apologize for all of that. But nonetheless, coming out of slavery, we were promised 40 acres and a mule and got jack, sharecropping. We got Jim Crow laws pressed upon us. We got the 13th Amendment, which my daughter is learning those, 24 amendments in class. And we had to pause for the sake of the culture to talk about the 13th Amendment, which basically states that slavery shall not exist except when someone has committed a criminal act. And of course, 1865, everything is a criminal act when it comes to Black people. So you're back in slavery. So you didn't get the 40 acres and a mule, which would have been the starting point of wealth, right? Then fast forward through the 20s when you had FDR and the New Deal because of the plummeting stock market in the Depression age. All right, he orchestrated to where he adjusted all of the banks to be able to give out loans and mortgages to aspiring white Americans, but left Black America with zilch. So again, there's another head start that was given. All right, then you get in fast forward to 2008, predatory lending practices, where now you got banks looking at you and saying, well, here, I will give you a mortgage with this changing interest rate. And all of a sudden now you can't afford the home that you could afford at the lower interest rate. So we've always been stuck with the 8 ball, right? When it comes to financial awareness, financial opportunity, and we have to seek out economic resources to make our finances work in our favor. So I'll start off with that. I mean, what are your take on some of that? I've got some more information I'll pull up in a minute, but let me pass the mic to you all.
Yeah, financially, there's a whole lot, that we can we can admit and agree upon that. We have definitely been sold a dream that we can't go to sleep to actually experience. We've been traumatized so much about this American dream that we were never a part of it from the very beginning. Even with the arguments about the Dred Scott, about Blacks not even really considering to have constitutionally backed support in its original writings. I mean, there's a lot that we can go back to when it talks about who we are and what we've experienced as a result of who we are. Even if we go back to the Great Migration and the urbanizing of Blacks and was 1958 through 1915 through 1968. All of that we dealt with the sharecropping and being abused and lied to and dealing with shiesty property owners and all type of games they played. And then, with the menial industrial manufacturing jobs that we got, segregated housing, the ghettos, and then we had the Tulsa situations and the Red Summer of 1919. And I mean, the ghetto and the welfare. I mean, there's so much that has attacked our economic ability to the point that here we are in 2021 and we're still crawling. We have not gotten, in what was that, the 20s? What year was that? What decade? That was the 20s when, or was it the 30s when Tulsa was bombed.
1921.
21. And so out of the roaring 20s, and a lot of times we don't even know because they did not show us all of those blackface movies that we kept seeing. If we look at those blackface movies where we was the dumb slave eating the watermelon, can't hardly talk, eyes a thing, like eyes a mask, all of that. That was happening at the very same time that Tulsa was up and booming. The very same time. Mm-hmm. And we thought that they had the whole world believing that we were still slaves running around with no shoes on and raggedy clothes. We were actually driving Cadillacs and Mercedes Benzes and living in brownstones in New York and all this kind of stuff. But the whole idea of them making sure that they're going to throw some kind of wrench in the plan has never failed. And here we are in 2021. We got up, we took a few steps in the 20s and then we fell back down and we're still crawling since then due to all of these other things, the trauma and drugs, the trauma and crime, the trauma and family disintegration, the trauma of jobs. Geez.
Well, I'll add into that also, but you brought up Tulsa. I think that's part of the issue and solution in itself. The issue is we talk about how you don't discuss trauma. All right. That's what our country effectively does not do when it comes to Tulsa. We had 100 years, end of May 31st, June 1st, that is, 100 years ago was the Tulsa massacre. This country did a poor job of celebrating that. Yeah. But then we fast forward to September 11th and they're going to ram that down your mind, your throat. Who was it? Kiana, or I think called it a brain F. That's essentially what happens every year, September 11th, coming up for that week. But we never acknowledge the trauma that has been inflicted for generations out of Tulsa. And matter of fact, obviously, Brother Bo, you know this, and I'm sure Suzette knows this also, but Tulsa was not the only one that was prospering. And we ain't got to get into that, but that's the point, though. We've had some traumatic cities here in the South Georgia area that, quite frankly, have been traumatized for various reasons, etc. Mary Turner, all this. But, the point is that, one, we as a country don't even acknowledge that trauma. So that's step one, acknowledging it. And this country refuses to do that on a large scale like they do for those that were traumatized by 9/11. All right. The second thing, as far as perhaps solution, the other side of that coin, is that we've got to take that in our own family cultural hands and say, we are going to teach our children about Tulsa. We are going to teach our children about, I think it was the Lakeland, Georgia community that had something similar, but it was burned to the ground. Matter of fact, Atlanta, Lake Lanier. I learned that Lake Lanier actually is a city that was flooded, that was prosperous. And so under that, which is why a lot of people, the haunted story is that's why a lot of people actually get killed at Lake Lanier, because there is a grave site basically under that of a city that was flooded. Right. So the point is that we don't discuss these things from a traumatic point of view. And we also need to do a much better job in our communities, in our churches, in our households, in our academies, whatever it is. But at first, in home, we need to look up what Tulsa was about. And despite what those other folks are doing to not teach our children about it, we need to celebrate it.
Oh, yeah. Well, what about the actual idea when it comes to some of the things that are happening now. Some of the contributing factors of what's causing trauma in our financial homes now. I would say, I think our whole perspective on wealth and finance is totally upside down.
Oh, absolutely. It's
And
confusing.
I'm not sure if it's because we have that Annie, that beggar type of desire when it comes to riches. Like, we want to get rich so we can show off. You know what I'm saying? Instead of looking at wealth as an opportunity to, set your family up, your next generation or next 2 or 3 generations up, to have a leg up economically. I think that may be why, but I definitely know that, our affinity for the glitz and the glamour and the shiny is definitely causing deep emotional wounds. A lot of us are getting homes and cars we can't afford, and then we're losing them. They're getting repoed, and then that's causing problems through divorces. Like, there's a lot when it comes to finances. But yeah, let's take a look at some of the things that are hitting us now.
You're right. I mean, well, Kiana speaks about, again, thank you, Kiana, for your continued engagement. She's definitely a counterpart in this conversation on a weekly basis. So we appreciate you chiming in and engaging in
Shout out to Kiana.
that you do. But she presents a couple of things about when it comes to economics, Black people must take accountability for our shortcomings as well. Victim isn't always the case. Absolutely right. And the fact that she poses a question, did integration hurt Black economics? I typed back in and representing the panel here, absolutely, Kiana. And so great, I see nods. I kind of represented the group well here by saying that. But I would just say that, one, that goes back to what Dr. King said in those hidden tapes, that the dream that he once had is now turned into a nightmare, because integration was never intended to be an assimilation on the Black forefront. That was not the point. All right. But what it turned into be was an assimilation process. So what now has happened through those, 50, 60 years now, is that we've now become accustomed to chasing the prosperity of white America. So when we talk about buying that new vehicle, those shiny this and that and other that we cannot afford, that big house that we cannot afford, and we haven't set stuff aside for a rainy day, that is because we are so traumatically desperate to show our prosperity versus actually really having wealth and prosperity. And it goes back to our tagline here. How are we going to restore that in order to create true generational wealth? Because what we have across the board is not, when in fact the net wealth of Black America is very respectably embarrassing.
Well, one thing that I know that is sabotaging and contributing to the financial trauma in terms of relationships and in our Black community is that we don't focus on financial literacy early enough. You know what I'm saying? It needs to be something that needs to be taught to children as part of their curriculum. We know already, historically, it's not going to be taught in the school systems, in the public arena. Education. So we're going to have to start taking a private approach to teaching financial literacy to our youth. Because I know me personally, as an adult, I wasn't privy to some of the financial literacy. And by the time you're an adult and you're trying to learn that, you're already behind the mark.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, you're playing.
Here's the problem with that. And I agree with you, by the way. The problem with that, generally speaking, is that, for instance, in our community here, we've got a 30% poverty rate, if not greater. We got a lot of people that would be ultimately blind teaching the blind, or don't even know where to start. I think the problem with where we are is that, again, it goes back to that accountability piece. And I agree wholeheartedly, Suzette, that we need to be teaching financial literacy at the household level, but collectively in our own communities, because I think what has to happen is we got to lean on some people who have that knowledge, like you just talked about, and we've got to bring that to our communities. Because like you said, the school system's not going to do that. They're not built to do it. They're not designed, nor do they want to do that. Because if you create a system to where financial empowerment is taught, then you don't have workers. Because the fact is that the school system is built to pump out people who sit down and shut up and follow orders like an employee. So it's not going to happen in the school. We've got to understand and stop being ignorant to the fact that it's not going to happen. In order to get out of this hole of financial ignorance, we've got to seek the appropriate help. And again, we've got to call on, going back to the connection to the last part of the conversation, we've got to call on our churches. If we got most of our people on Sunday morning, afternoon, evening, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever it is, in church, at what point of the evening or the daily or the weekly cycle are we just taking a moment to teach financial literacy on a continual basis? If we've got everybody in a setting, that's just one poke. But the point is that we should be doing this collectively across our communities regardless. And we've got to be coming to the table.
Yeah.
Well, that absolutely. And to backtrack 1 second, another way that religion can help is we implement this type of teaching, financial literacy in the church. Since we have such an affinity, a weekly affinity to the church, at least twice a week for many of us, that would be another opportunity for the church to kind of remove the traumatic experiences in that arena, and not just come bring all your tithe and offering and come pay us, and we don't. Yeah, that ain't the place you want to be. But also, yeah, I didn't even bring that up because that's a whole nother leg. But that's another problem of how the churches cause a lot of trauma because we're not teaching the entire principle of giving and receiving. Anyway, but when we talk about the financial trauma in relationships, I think a lot of times when we get in relationships, we make finances the last thing. If not the last thing, it's close. It's the last quart. It's the last quadrant that we deal with in relationships. A lot of times, in the very beginning, it's about whatever, and then down the road, eventually, a lot of times the couples will then talk about finances after you've fallen for someone who can't balance a checkbook, after you've fallen for someone who doesn't know how to maintain their credit or repair their credit. You've fallen for someone who's extremely impulsive in their spending, and I think that's been another problem that we're talking about trauma in relationships. I think that's another reason. I think that's another reason why we've had so many issues. Not only that, I think that a lot of times when we come to relationships, we have the financial part in the wrong place. We're supposed to be building a financial future. We're supposed to be preparing and kind of working together to ensure that our financial stability our financial livelihood is strong and thriving. Instead, a lot of times, I'm talking about the bad part. A lot of times we're looking for somebody else to kind of be that financial guru or somebody else to kind of handle that issue. When in my opinion, I think that both male and female should at least approach that financial issue together. They might not make the final decision, but I think both parties need to be well aware of where they stand financially. You should have the credit question, when you're dating. You should have, what are your financial goals in the next 10, 15 years or whatever. You should have these conversations. Because my mother always taught me romance without finance is a nuisance. So if we can't get our money together, then loving each other is good. But how are we going to keep these lights on, etc.? So I think that's another major problem. We talk about trauma relationships, not kind of putting that financial discussion further down the road. And I believe it should be the first 5 or 10 minutes of the ride.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have that conversation early, ladies, so you can exit quickly.
And it'll see why you do that. Why you do that? Why you do it? Because you see, I told you about caping. I told you about caping for these sisters. They're all right. I ain't saying nothing. I'm gonna let y'all have it. Go ahead. I'm gonna read Kiana's question or Kiana's comment. She said, our economics are hurting by effect of our social habits. One prosperous farmer in South Georgia had all daughters. None have had children. Wealth follows those who practice reproduction or family. That's absolutely true. I did see a comment earlier. I think Kiana also talked about her being 50% kind of still connected to the 40 acres and a mule concept, where she has some land that's generationally inherited to her, some sharecrop land, 4 or 5 generations. That's another way that, one thing we probably hadn't talked about, connecting to your family in a positive way can actually possibly connect you back to certain inheritance that you may not have had if you weren't such a loner. That's another thing that could help our finances,
and
our financial future.
And it also contributes to our blueprint, restoring the family structure. And that was one of the, talking about traumatic, that was one of the survival techniques, was the unit of family. They had a lot of supportive family around to help through those traumatic times. Of course, nobody wants to go through trauma, but if you had to go through it, your support system, if you had a strong support system, you could survive it, or at least your percentage rate of surviving it is higher.
Yes. So if I would add to, we now kind of closing out this segment for our blueprint thoughts here, I would add that if you're in the rent cycle, there's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of where you are at this point, but have aspirations to get out of the rent cycle. Rent only, even though that's sort of my business in a sense, but rent only makes someone else wealthy. All right. But if partnering up with a knowledge-based organization in order to secure more financial literacy, and I always term it as financial empowerment, because literacy is one thing, to know how to balance a checkbook, etc. But understanding the next point is to get into some sort of other vehicle of wealth, such as stocks and those other non-traditional routes that others have not been taught. You have to get smart in that, because that's where the wealth is generated. But that's, again, easier said than done, I understand, but this is just blueprint recommendations. Secure greater skills in order to raise your income potential, because we are already, obviously, just like any minority organization, or not organization, but minority group, such as women, African American, Hispanics, we're already behind the 8 ball in the sense of our fair shake of equitable income when it comes to our white counterparts. But gain a skill set that you can secure greater income, and also potentially secure an enterprise of your own. In other words, start your own business. That will, again, give you more income revenue. Learn to be smarter with your finances in order to decrease your expenses, but also link up with financial experts or financial people that know more than you. Basically have a team of people that will allow you to learn more and do better. All right. If we may, let's go ahead and transition a bit more, rolling the dice here. Suzette, let's talk about healthcare and the factors that play into that as far as trauma, but then relationships. How does that give us a baseline of kind of where we are, if you may, about healthcare and in Black America?
Right. Well, the pandemic has really given us a snapshot on where we are in the Black community as health. The high risk population that was most affected initially when the pandemic came out was those who had pre-existing conditions such as high blood pressure, such as diabetes. And those are the two main illnesses, or long-term illnesses, that kind of plague the Black community. And because of such, we were really targeted when this pandemic came out. So definitely that's going to cause not only a health stress in terms of all different kind of stressors, such as caregiver stress, such as health, the cost of healthcare, how to maintain healthcare, because when you're talking about these type of illnesses such as high blood pressure and diabetes, that's not something that you can bargain with. You have to have your medication, or if you want to stay alive, So those are some main stressors in our community, and sometimes you have to go to the origin of it. Sometimes those illnesses come on sometimes due to what we eat. You know what I'm saying? Due to our lack of exercise, our lack of care, or how we take care of our bodies, our temples. So we're going to have to, in terms of healthcare, we're going to have to take a very personal approach first. um, in terms of taking care of ourselves and how before we, create another issue that bleeds over to our relationships. It causes a lot of problems financially. Not to mention, like I said earlier, it puts a lot of stress on a relationship because you don't have the time to focus on your relationship because you're too busy being nurse, or you're too busy being doctor, and too busy being chauffeur, all of these things. So it kind of takes away from, developing your relationship, the intimacy of it all. So I think, I don't have a grade for it, but we are not doing too well overall. We got to do better. We got to do better. But I will say that a lot of like trainers and health food gurus, a lot of people in our community are going vegan. So I think we're gaining some traction. I know this pandemic has showed us that we are not where we need to be, but I do think we're gaining some traction and becoming aware that our health is a part of our financial component, which leads to trauma issues or stressors in our relationships.
Well, I would say, yeah, Edward is muted there. I'm gonna go ahead. I would say definitely, with all agreements to that, that one good thing about where we are now in this progressive society is that we've got a lot of people that are in the fitness community. We've got a lot of people in the health area, just like you just said. Valdosta, South Georgia is definitely a mainstay for nursing and medical field, here in South Georgia, North Florida area. So that is a great plus for our Black community. We've always had, a good history. When you look at Black history across the board, we've always had good presence with, Carter G. Woodson and even George Washington Carver, with regards to those that have studied pharmaceuticals and things of that nature, that where, plant-based material that could help the community. But, even in this case where I'm saying now in this new millennium, we've got a lot of resources that we should be tapping into when it comes to fitness and knowing more about how our bodies, our mass index, if you will, can affect our health. We've got a lot of resources, even though that we may have had, or not may, we had traumatic experiences in the past that have gotten passed down, i.e. Tuskegee experimentation going on, which still plays in the back of people's minds in our community. One way that we can kind of solution that is link up with doctors that look like you. And we exist, especially in this community. I know, shout out to some of the people that we have here, like Dr. Samuel Taylor. He's a OBGYN here that we used for our youngest son. Dr. Charlene Blosh, she's a pediatrician that we use. But these are Black doctors or medical professionals that, we can trust. So I think that in one way we are traumatized by our history, but as I forget who said it before in the chat, we can't let victim be our only narrative. So we've got to do something about it. We have the power to do that, and we hold our destiny in hand. I'll pass the mic.
Another thing that I want to bring to the forefront is that
I wanted to touch that. I wanted to touch before you move that conversation, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, go ahead. It's the same.
Okay, but yeah, I just wanted to. Of course, I don't say of course, but I agree with you all on that about your perspectives on the health. I think we also need to look at our health as a conglomerate. It goes back to the epigenetics. Basically, in many ways, epigenetics is the ultimate intersection between your lifestyle, your health, and even the people in your home's health, your children, your spouse, etc. We also have to understand that if our environment isn't healthy, it will directly affect our status of health as well. Not just the food we eat, not just the exercise that most of us don't do, because that's not on the top of our list in the Black community. They don't, because we believe Black don't crack and they don't need to go to the gym. So I don't know what our issue is, but again, that, and then on top of that, making sure that your diet is directly linked to your psychological mental health, which trauma is a deep emotional wound. So if we really got to get back to the importance of eating right. And we gotta also we need to divorce the slave diet. We really need to get away from that. That's causing trauma because most
Right.
of us are dying early, especially dealing with this pandemic that we've been dealing with. A lot of these pre-existing conditions are what actually cause, the contraction of, you know, um, the pandemic. I'll just call it that. And so I think that's just another piece that we're going to have to really implement, and understanding that we're going to have to get back to our original way of eating, which was devoid of a lot of meat. We're going to have to retrain our palate. We're going to have to retrain our refrigerator, retrain our spending habits when we go purchase these things, because it's not just going to the therapist. It's not just changing your focus on your religion and how you follow. It's not just the finances. You need to also eat right, sleep well, hydrate. Stress also affects your health when it comes to you being able to deal with. I told you, epigenetics is an intersection. It's an ultimate intersection between lifestyle, health, and environment. So that's another thing that we should really focus on, and understanding that if you're eating well, you need to make sure that your family's dealing with stress well, and you also need to make sure that your lifestyle is good. You're doing things you like to do. Find something that you and your partner can do together that the both of y'all enjoy, so you can smile together, so that you can laugh together. These are things that are important when it comes to restoring the Black family. It's got to get beyond what you bring to the table. No, can I exist with you? Can we laugh together? Can we eat right together? Can we exercise? All of that is a part of the epigenetical approach when it comes to overall health, and not just having a healthy plate of food. So
through practicing all that, brother, I think that's awesome. And the fact that practicing all of that actually is a modeling for our youth. So if you have kids, and like, for instance, we walk around our block here as a family. And so what do you think the kids are going to do when they grow up? I mean, they're going to be active and walk around. I mean, so, shout out to, my wife. She tags along, and, sometimes I drag her away from her phone sometimes to say, hey, we're going to hit this block one time. But again, sometimes, even I'll give my daughter and son, older son, but primarily our daughter, quick shout out because of how well she's doing, in sports, which is track and cross country. But it's just, I had a question. Somebody asked me, what did y'all do, to get her to that state? And I'm like, really? I mean, we wouldn't, as Bold and I always talk, I mean, we were not running no 5Ks. We were running, sprints and middle distance 400 and max, as far as around the track. But, some of it was just staying active with her. And that type of modeling has transitioned into greatness for her in her walk. And so I think, again, back to what you're saying, is that really just being active as a family, hooking up with somebody that has that same like-minded willingness to get out there and be active and eat right really is a good way to not just talk about it, but really profess it and model it for your kids.
Bro, absolutely. I want to highlight something real quick, and I'm gonna go on mute before it scrolls up. Latessa said she had to fire her doctor because they wouldn't listen to her and her body. One thing we need to realize is that the mass approach to health is dealing with those of Anglo-Saxon background.
Yes.
All that data is for them. A lot of it isn't for us. So Latessa, I would have to say congratulations and thank you for using your common sense and realizing that all doctors aren't all knowing. So that's absolutely wonderful. Also,
thank you.
I want to
go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And then another thing is try to look for more people like Queen Afua. Jarke and Kiana brought her up. Natural healers that look like you.
Mm-hmm.
A homeopathic, naturopathic doctors that are academics. They've got the credentials. They just dress in traditional garb a lot of the times, but they have a lot of knowledge that fits your physiology as a melanated being. That definitely will help you when it comes to freeing your spirit, your trauma, getting those other holistic approaches when it comes to meditation, what is it? Crystal, all that. They got crystals. They got all kind of things that you
Aura,
can do.
your aura,
That
your
that
chakra.
deals a lot of that chakras and stuff like that. So I mean, it gives you an opportunity to kind of dig in and to learn more. And then again, that's something else that you can translate that to your children, so they can have another practice or another cultural tradition that they can take along with them, and then implement that with their kids. And that'll be another way we can kind of rewind and reverse.
Exactly. It goes back to that spirituality piece that we talked about earlier. That is sometimes, in this case, Queen Afua might be considered taboo when actually she's tapping into our cultural lineage there. Suzette, please go ahead. I'm sorry. I think we.
Y'all sure?
Yeah.
No, I was just gonna agree. Actually, I was gonna comment on some of the things that the ladies, the queens on the live have already commented on. The holistic health approach. There are some holistic providers. They are far and in between because the traditional, medical world does not always acknowledge them as being a real, cure or antidote or, being valid in the medical world. However, as Brother Bold has already acknowledged, you have to be very intuitive about what your own health. You have to be your own advocate about what works for you. So the holistic approach really addresses, as what we already talked about, your mind, your body, your health. It goes into your spirituality, into healthy emotions. It helps you identify your healthy emotions. So look for other ways outside of traditional, Western world medicine. Look for other ways to make yourself whole, and not only you, but as Queen Afua has done, pass that on to generation, and that is how we continue to address generational health, and try to chip away at this trauma that we've been accumulating over the centuries. So we're going to have to take a different approach, and that's it. I think that's one of the ways we can combat against it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so if we kind of, again, turn the dial again and go to a quick topic. I know we're kind of running out of time eventually here, but, education, let's talk about that. There are, major disparities, that I found on the United Negro College Fund site, uncf.org. It talks about K-12 disparity facts and figures. One of the statistics talks about African-American students are less likely than white students to have access to college-ready courses. And so I think that's one of the areas to where, in our community here, that, for instance, we know that our school system across the way, of course, we're all Lowndes graduates here, but, the school across the way, I think, has done a whole lot better than in the past with regards to this statistic here. I think we see a lot of attempting to level the playing field when it comes to opportunities and college ready. Now they call it like pathways, where you can align based on the fact that you want to be a chef. Now they've got like a chef study pathway at the school now. So I think that it does help. But across the board, I mean, there still is disparity. I mean, this is 2011, 2012 stat that only 57% of Black students have access to full range of math and science courses necessary for college readiness. And that's a shame compared to 81% of Asian American students, and the stereotype there, and 71% of white students that have access to a full range of math and science courses. So, there's some other things in there, but, the access to education is totally different when it comes to disparity sake. I remember back in the day, my dad would do, I think it was a JTPA program or something like that they called it. I mean, they would basically take students during the summer and sort of offline, if you will, not really connected to the school, but perhaps it was really like literally in a different facility, and teach them things like the financial literacy piece, how to write a check. I mean, where others wouldn't have been taught that skill, or just catching them up over the summer when it came to math, what is now ELA, but basically like English classes and things of that nature. So again, some of the solution was right there in the past, where we have to pick up the mantle and close our own gaps.
And
How
we
do y'all
have
feel about some of this disparity here?
absolutely. I was very fortunate enough to be a participant, a partaker in that. And salute to those people who, because most of them volunteered their time over the summer. You know, it's educators that volunteered their time to make sure that the kids didn't lose any skills while they were out of school, or if, like you said, if they needed to catch up before they entered into the next school term. So I think that we're gonna have to start going outside of our selfishness, going outside of ourselves, and start giving back to these traumatic disparities that we have in our community. And we do that by giving of ourselves, creating programs, being consistent with the programs that we create. And number one, identifying, as we are now, the different areas that we have trauma in our community, and then figuring out a real effective way of how can we address those and make a lasting change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's also, a prevalent stat that talks about, Black students not having access to honors and AP or advanced placement courses. I know, take, I guess, my path. I mean, Bold, I mean, all of my classes were, for the most part, I was the only one, if not the other only one in the classroom. And what that does over time, if you're not balanced, thankful for my parents as far as the balance they provided to see and be around, our culture. But, some people, you would see them being that only one and they would be assimilated to that culture. You call them nerds and they really act that part. But, I think some of the solution is what I would say I experienced was that you got to have parents that are involved. You got to have parents that are involved in the culture, whether it's just societal norms for Black America or the culture, as we say now. But that has to be a balance, because we have to promote education and the importance of education and high achievement and make that an expectation. But at the same time, understand that you are probably sending your melanated son or daughter to a classroom, perhaps a university, that they're going to be the single digit or even the teens percentile of that population. And they've got to have a strong foundation in Black America to want to associate with that and come back to it.
The only piece I want to add to that, I mean, you guys done a great job, kind of explaining that. And yeah, Kevin, that JTPA thing was serious back then. I had almost completely forgot about that until he brought it up. But yeah, I think just another piece to add to that would be the fact that we need to make sure that we go along with our children on their learning journey. I just had a conversation with my daughter today. When I went to pick her up from school, the first, I always ask her, how was her day? Did she do anything nice for anybody? What did she learn new? I ask her the same questions every day because I want to know every day what her experience is like. I want to go on her journey with her. And she said, well, Dad, I don't have any homework tonight. So, and I was like, okay, but honey, that doesn't mean that just because you left school that your learning stops. So first of all, we have to encourage them to want to learn beyond the classroom. But I think that's where it comes, where we have to then provide them something else interesting, to continue that learning process. So what I do is, she likes reading, those girly books. It's kind of diary type books, of course. And so I always make sure we go to the library. Another thing, make sure you utilize your library. Go to the library and allow her to pick a book out. I'll pick a book out, and then we'll read that book. It's two totally different books, but we're reading our book at the same time, and we're telling each other what we're reading along the way. That allows us to encourage them, to read as well as us reading. Like our parents used to tell us, do what I say, not as I do. No, we ain't doing that no more. If I'm asking you to do something, I want you to see me do it, because the more I model that behavior, the quicker it'll change your daily habits. So I think that's a good thing for us to do. Like you all said, not only those providing those additional opportunities, but go along on that journey with them. Read the newspaper with them, find something to read, and learn together, share stories together. And I think that will raise their cognitive abilities as well. And it also reinforces the fact that if you want to be that top percentile of student, you're gonna have to put in that extra work. So I agree with everything that's been said.
I would add then that, you made me think about it with regards to going on that journey with them. I think that's a very great perspective to add to the pot here when we're talking a blueprint. Going on that journey together, reading with them, experiencing the library, man, I tell you, we love our library here. We've always infused that in our household where we're going to just make trips to the library because the child is not going to experience all the books that they can at their school library. Some school libraries I've experienced just in the past few years, kind of visiting some of our city schools. At one point, one of those middle schools was real scarce in actual books. And so so you got to watch that and use the resources in the city. But where I wanted to go with that is another leg of that, taking that journey with your student is watching, like you said, what are they bringing home to study? What are the activities and events that they are celebrating? Because one way that you can look at it is look at your U.S. calendar. How many African-based holidays are there? But we have Mardi Gras, we have Cinco de Mayo, all right, we have President's Day. I mean, we have all these, and now they're going to eventually make.
We got Juneteenth.
I would say they made Juneteenth an official holiday this year, so we'll see what fight there'll be. So that again, it's already a fight not to give it a holiday in Georgia, but we'll see what events are wrapped around that. It is out of cycle of the school system, but so my point is the assimilation process in school. So for instance, there is this stat that I came across in concert with what you were saying is that only 10% of public school principals are Black compared to 80% white. 82% of public school educators are white compared to 18% teachers of color. And so
of color,
all colors, right? Asian, Indian, Black. All right. So of color. All right. So the point is that you're not going to get a familiarity, someone that is going to look after you in the school system. Sometimes our teachers are looking at our melanated children with a certain eye of expectation that discipline is needed, or when you're looking at Sally and Leroy, or little Leroy over here, is two different perspectives when teachers look at them. I remember when I think I talked about this on the show earlier, in our early days, Bold. I got some email from our teacher at one point when Kalel was like in elementary school that he thumped somebody. And I'm like, oh yeah, really? That's what you looking at my child about? But here's another example though, primarily where I want to go with this is that, for instance, this week, Monday, I think is officially Johnny Appleseed Day. All right. I had to look that up because my kindergartner, I'm looking out for these assimilation tools they're using. All right. My kindergartner is excited about Friday because it's Johnny Appleseed Day that they're going to celebrate. And they want the kids to dress up in white button-up shirts and overalls, and roll your overalls up if you want to, and have a little pot hat. Who are we celebrating, by the way? All right. So guess what my little son won't be wearing to school that day? Matter of fact, I've already picked out. Matter of fact, I had it right here. Not for the show, but I had it picked out already. The I Love Africa. You probably can't even see it now. I Love Africa shirt is what he's going to be wearing Friday. I don't do that. I already told you. Matter of fact, I don't know if I told y'all, but September 11th, again, everybody definitely recognized those that were in harm's way and that were killed. And it sort of ends there for me in a sense, because it happens all the time in the Black community, by the way. So what they were doing was they're going to show a video to the sixth graders and gave a permission slip to the parents to say, is it okay that, that your child watches this video? And I selected the no box because I'm like, I've got enough. I already told them about September 11th. If I need to say some more, then that's great. But until the school community wants to talk in the same manner and revere 1st of June or the end of May, whichever one want to pick. But when they want to talk about Tulsa in the same manner that terrorists are described for September 11th, then we'll participate in all of these assimilation tools that they're using. But, in that way, that's just the way that me as a parent, I kind of take the bull by the horns and just say, there are some things I'm going to try to counteract. And some things you can't. For instance, as I said before, my daughter's learning the amendments. Well, what I can only do is focus in on some things that they just glossed over. Or you got to memorize the 13th Amendment, by the way, of the 24 that you're recalling. But let's slow down and let's get into the psyche of what they meant when they wrote that 13th Amendment, which still has an effect today.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. In what context in what spirit was it wrote in? Yeah, absolutely. And that again, that comes back, and that's how I think everybody's going to have to take an individual and family collaborative effort at chipping away at this trauma. As each one of us have a responsibility, whether it's professional or not personal. We have a responsibility at chipping away at this trauma if we're going to restore our Black family structures and eventually create generational wealth.
One thing I want to add, I know we're probably going to wrap it up. I know we got a few more time. We might have to come back, but one way education has created trauma in relationships today is, I think we have given it more credence and we've misplaced its importance. Having a degree doesn't necessarily directly affect your ability to cohabitate and coexist with someone. And I think a lot of times nowadays, we're focusing so much on getting that degree and so much on getting that education that it's, in many cases, has separated us. In many cases, because a lot of us feel as though since we've gotten out the ghetto, we went to college and, we got some letters behind our name and we got a piece of paper we can hang on the wall. Now that separates me from the rest of those that haven't been to college. And so I think that's a lot of not a lot, but one part of the emotional wound that education probably has created, relationships. It has done a lot of dividing when it comes to our communities. And look at those that got educated back in the day. They did whatever they got, they brought it back to the people. They brought it back to the hood. They brought it back to, their tribe or their circle. But now it's like we're trying to get education, trying to get degrees to get away from the very people who we come back to the hood to see, have family reunions and dinners and all this kind of stuff. And so, I think all the things that we provided before are definitely important. I think we need to address this. This is actually very prevalent. I'll just put it like this. A lot of times, certain members within our demographic won't choose a partner if they're not on their educational level. And sometimes the person that might not be as educated as you might be the best fit for you because they probably got better common sense than you do. Or they might have, they might have some other strength that didn't require them to get a degree for. You know what I'm saying? So I think we need to start looking at people for their character. I think we start looking at people for their ability to commit, etc., outside of them just having a degree. You got a degree, that's cool to have. But my grandmother was able to have a marriage over 60 years without one. And I would rather have a degreeless partner who can cohabitate with me and cooperate and move forward with me than to have someone who's educated and I got to go back and forth and we got to have this match about who's more important, or who's more educated. So I think that's something we should definitely address in our blueprint moving forward.
Especially in this day and age where entrepreneurship is on the rise, being a small business owner is on the rise. A lot of times, a formal education is not required. That piece of paper, as Kiana talks about, she agrees with you, Mr. Mack. These fancy papers have basically ostracized us from Black men.
I wasn't gonna say it, Kiana, but thank you. Thank you, Kiana.
Absolutely. And you gotta look at the character of, in this case, of a man. And sometimes, even back and forth. I mean, my mom wasn't a degreed person. She attended Fort Valley State University, as it is now. It was college back then. But she chose to leave, and join her husband, my dad, on his journey to his legacy here, following his degree path. So the point is that, you can have what is a a very iconic person in your life that may not be degreed. So
Kiana's a mess. She said, while I'm
yeah.
working on my PhD out of boredom. Oh my gosh. That's funny. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that was it. That's a good point to make. That when we tie this back to the whole relationship conversation, is sometimes we put these requirements in place that aren't necessary. In the sense of having a successful relationship. You want a person with this, and you want to attain your PhD. And if I had my Kevin Samuels, I'm a PhD. How important is that in comparison to a successful relationship?
Well, it doesn't equal success
It does.
automatically, which
Yes,
some
correct.
people equate that too. Oh, automatically, yeah, this got to work. You checked all the boxes, so it's gonna equate success, and that's not the case.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we got to teach that, that's a new norm, as we talked about before, new norms that we need to teach in our society. That because we are, like, especially in this area, and historically, we are a highly aspiring, educated culture, and especially in South Georgia, even in our frat chapter, Mac. We have a lot of educators, and definitely all respect go to them. But there's a lot of mantra that's taught, no disrespect to anybody, but just like Robert Kiyosaki talks about, Rich Dad Poor Dad book, we are always taught, go to school, get good grades, go to college, get a good job so that you can retire. And that is a fail path when it comes to wealth. Wealthy families do not teach that. Wealthy families do not teach that. So we're talking about creating Black wealth. We have to switch the narrative. We have to teach our kids a non-traditional way to gain wealth, and wealth is not about the traditional path that I just laid out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely a good point.
Because you end up learning it later. I mean, it is what it is. What I know now. I'm glad that I executed it in our late 20s, so that we could effectively retire, in our mid to late 30s. But just imagine if that was something that was taught out of high school, to start investing in real estate, stocks, and all of that. The best thing that I would say happened to me that doesn't necessarily get afforded to most students is that in our advanced gifted class, again, because that was the label, we were offered and exposed to it, but this stock market game thing. So that allows some comfortability with someone like me to do that later in life. But that's why I say we have to normalize these conversations and expose our kids and our families to these unorthodox pathways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think my last comment of the night is, first of all, I just want to give a shout out to all our viewers tonight who are very engaging and very transparent in some of their comments that they placed with us tonight. We appreciate you just participating and being a active part in the show tonight. We appreciate each and every one of you for coming in. We do invite you back again next week, same place, same time. Come on back. Think about some of the topics that we talked about tonight. Think about some of the things. Are you able to implement some things? Are you able to change some of your mindset about some of the things that we discussed tonight, as well as what are some of the solutions that you have discovered that you might not have shared with us? Bring all that good stuff back next week and come on and share with us. And my last comment would be let's all keep a mindset, an open mindset to all this information that we're gaining in terms of trauma, because every single one of us have some area of trauma that we've been affected by in our communities. And let's think about what are the solutions, what can we change as an individual to kind of help contribute to a positive change. So that's my challenge tonight.
Absolutely. Listen, family, we've only gotten through half of our list of trauma contributors, so we may come back and finish that up with the other 4 or 5. We'll have that conversation later. But listen, again, I want to thank everybody for joining on as well. Thank you for all of your comments. Thank you so much for everybody that has participated. Definitely meet us back next week. This thing is going to get deeper and deeper. by the time we're done, you and your family will definitely be on the road utilizing this new blueprint for this new direction of your family. But it's that time. It's that time again. I feel like Mr. Rogers. It's that time on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. But I want to share something with y'all tonight. I think it'll help you as we get ready to close out. There's a quote that I found. I couldn't find the actual author, but the quote says, "If you aren't willing to work for it, don't complain about not having it." I'll say that again. If you aren't willing to work for it, don't complain about not having it. I want to tell you a quick story about a man by the name of Vincent Van Gogh. I think most of us probably know who that is. But you're undoubtedly familiar with at least some of Van Gogh's 900 paintings. You've probably seen the Starry Night, Bedroom in Aries, or even Cafe Terrace at Night, to name a few. But what you might not have known is that Van Gogh only sold one painting during his entire lifetime. In other words, he went to the grave thinking he was a failed artist. Most failed artists who died in the 1800s, they don't even have their own Wikipedia page. But though Van Gogh might not have benefited from the fame or fortune of it in his lifetime, he remained committed to realizing his artistic vision. While no one was interested in buying his paintings when he was alive, Van Gogh continued pouring out his heart and his soul into his canvases. And over time, that commitment finally paid off. Van Gogh is routinely included amongst the greatest painters of all time, not because of the 900 paintings he painted, because of the one that he did not give up on. I want to leave y'all definitely with a very small quote, a very small moment of motivation, and that is, whatever it is that you want to happen, you can't complain about it if you don't work for it. Whatever it is you want to see come to pass, you can't complain about not having it if you never start working on it. Vincent Van Gogh, one of the greatest painters that we have in this era of time, is known for one real painting that made him famous. The one thing that you're not willing for could be the one thing that could make you famous. And so I got to ask you the question, that dream or that business or that job or that degree or what a family goal or whatever it is that you have, you can't complain about it if you're not going to work towards it. So tonight, I motivate you. Tonight, I push you. Tonight, I encourage you. If you aren't willing to work for that thing, don't complain when you don't have it. But if you really want it, get up and do something about it. Because your future is waiting on your first step. I love you. I'll see y'all next week.